The cream-colored envelope arrived with the morning mail, nestled between quarterly reports and vendor contracts like a viper among doves. Zara Williams didn't recognize the calligraphy at first. Elegant, swooping letters that spoke of old money and older traditions. Her corner office on the 42nd floor of the Chrysler Building caught the early September light, casting long shadows across her mahogany desk as she turned the envelope over in her manicured hands. The return address made her breath catch. Whitmore Estate, East Hampton. She knew that address. Had walked those manicured grounds in designer heels that pinched her feet, smiled at garden parties where conversations died when she approached, endured charity galas where she was introduced as Marcus's wife, rather than the tech executive who'd just closed a $12 million funding round. The invitation itself was a masterpiece of understated wealth. Thick cardstock with gold embossing, the kind that whispered rather than shouted its expense. But it was the names that made her hands tremble. Marcus Jonathan Whitmore III and Rebecca Catherine Sterling request the honor of your presence. Ms. Williams. Her assistant's voice seemed to come from underwater. Zara looked up to find Priya standing in the doorway, concern etched across her young face. The 26-year-old had worked for Zara for 2 years, long enough to recognize when her boss was fighting internal battles. "I'm fine," Zara said, though her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. She set the invitation down carefully, as if it might explode. Just unexpected mail. Priya's dark eyes flicked to the invitation, taking in the expensive paper and formal script. "Should I reschedule your 10 o'clock? No." The word came out sharper than intended. Zara softened her tone. "No, I'm fine. Really." But she wasn't fine. As Priya retreated, closing the door with a soft click, Zara found herself transported back 3 years to another September day. The day Marcus had sat across from her in their marriage counselor's office and delivered his verdict with the clinical precision of a surgeon. "You're too ambitious, Zara. Too intense. My family thinks..." "Your family thinks what, Marcus?" "That maybe we rushed into this. That we're from different worlds." Different worlds. The euphemism had hung between them like smoke, acrid and choking. What he'd meant, what his mother had whispered at dinner parties when she thought Zara couldn't hear, was that a black woman, no matter how educated, how successful, how carefully she modulated her voice or straightened her hair, would never truly belong in their world of country clubs and charity boards. The invitation felt like a summoning now, a calculated move designed to showcase his return to form. Rebecca Sterling, blonde, blue-blooded, safe. Everything Zara had never been in their eyes. Her phone buzzed. A text from her business partner, James. Board meeting moved to 2 p.m. "You good?" Zara stared at the message, then at the invitation. 3 years ago, she'd been building her company from a cramped WeWork space, fighting for every client, every dollar, every ounce of respect in a tech world that looked at her and saw diversity hire rather than visionary. Now, Nexus Technologies employed 200 people and had just gone public. She was worth more than Marcus had ever dreamed of being. So why did this piece of paper make her feel like that 28-year-old woman again, standing in his mother's living room while Eleanor Whitmore explained, with a smile sharp as crystal, that some people simply weren't cut out for this lifestyle? The city sprawled below her windows, a concrete jungle where she'd clawed her way to the top through brilliance and sheer force of will. She'd built an empire from nothing, proved every doubter wrong, created technology that was changing how companies hired and promoted talent. She was Zara Williams, CEO, innovator, force of nature. But Marcus's invitation had found the girl inside who still remembered her mother cleaning other people's houses, who'd learned to make herself smaller in rooms full of people who looked nothing like her. Her fingers found her phone, scrolling to James's number. When she spoke, her voice was steady, controlled. The voice of a woman who'd learned to armor herself in competence. "James? It's me. We need to talk." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan pulsed with afternoon energy, oblivious to the war being declared in a corner office where a successful black woman held an invitation that felt like a gauntlet thrown at her feet. The game was about to begin. The leather chair in Dr. Sarah Chen's office had witnessed 3 years of Zara's unraveling and rebuilding. Today, It cradled her like an old friend as she stared at the invitation spread across the coffee table between them, its gold lettering catching the afternoon light streaming through the Upper East Side windows. "Tell me what you're feeling," Dr. Chun said, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who'd guided countless souls through their darkest moments. Zara's fingers traced the edge of the invitation. "Like I'm 28 again. 5 years ago, the Whitmore family's annual charity gala." Zara had chosen her dress carefully, elegant but not too bold, expensive but not flashy. She'd learned the rules by then, the delicate dance of fitting in without standing out too much. "Zara, darling." Eleanor Whitmore's voice had cut through the cocktail chatter like a blade wrapped in silk. "You look absolutely stunning. So exotic." The word hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Exotic. Not beautiful. Not elegant. Exotic. Like a rare bird in a cage. Something to be admired from a distance but never truly accepted. "She called me exotic," Zara said now, her voice barely above a whisper. "At their charity gala. In front of everyone." Dr. Chun leaned forward slightly. "How did that make you feel?" "Like a specimen. Like I was there for their entertainment." Zara's hands clenched in her lap. Marcus just smiled and nodded. Didn't say a word. The memory shifted, kaleidoscoping into another scene. The Hamptons' house, summer of their second year of marriage. Zara had been on a conference call with investors, closing a deal that would triple her company's valuation. She'd been electric with excitement, practically vibrating with success. "Honey, you're being a bit loud," Marcus had said when she'd hung up, his voice carrying that particular tone she'd learned to dread, embarrassment masked as concern. "My parents are trying to enjoy their afternoon." His father, Richard Whitmore, had looked up from his newspaper with the expression of a man who just smelled something unpleasant. "Perhaps the business world has made you forget your manners, Zara." The words had hit like a physical blow. Not congratulations on her success. Not pride in her achievement. Just a reminder that she was too much, too loud, too ambitious for their carefully curated world. "He defended me at first," Zara continued, her therapist's office feeling like a confessional. "When his friends made comments about affirmative action, when his mother asked if I was really qualified for my position. He'd speak up, change the subject. But that changed. The question hung heavy in the air. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its relentless energy, but inside this room, time seemed suspended. Gradually, like watching someone drown in slow motion. Zara's voice cracked. First, he'd just stay quiet. Then he'd make excuses for them. "That's just how they are. They don't mean anything by it. You're being too sensitive." The final memory rose unbidden, sharp as broken glass. Richard Whitmore's study, mahogany-paneled and heavy with the weight of old money. Zara had been summoned like a servant, though she hadn't understood why until she'd seen the check on his desk. $5 million, he'd said without preamble, his pale eyes cold as winter. "More than enough to start fresh somewhere else." "Excuse me? You're holding my son back, Zara. Socially, professionally. This marriage was a mistake, and we both know it." His voice had carried the casual cruelty of someone accustomed to buying his way out of problems. "Take the money. Disappear gracefully. Everyone wins. Everyone except me. You'll land on your feet. Your kind always does. Your kind." The words had echoed in her mind long after she'd walked out of that study, long after she'd confronted Marcus, long after their marriage had crumbled into bitter recriminations and legal proceedings. "He offered me money to leave," Zara said now, the words tasting like ash. $5 million to step away gracefully from the marriage. Dr. Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her dark eyes. "And Marcus knew about it, had probably suggested it." Zara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "When I confronted him, he said maybe his father had a point. That maybe we were from different worlds after all." The invitation seemed to pulse on the coffee table, a reminder of how that story had ended, and how this new chapter was beginning. "So why do you think he sent this?" Dr. Chen asked. Zara met her therapist's gaze, and for the first time since opening the envelope, she smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. Because he wants to humiliate me one last time. Show his new world that he's back where he belongs, with someone who fits. Her voice grew stronger, more certain. He has no idea what he's just unleashed. The elevator doors opened to reveal the 43rd floor of the Chrysler Building, where Nexus Technologies had claimed an entire level of gleaming possibility. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Central Park, its autumn canopy spreading like a tapestry below. This wasn't the cramped WeWork space where Zara had started 3 years ago, coding through tears and building algorithms fueled by rage and determination. James Rodriguez looked up from his triple monitor setup as Zara approached, his dark eyes immediately reading the tension in her shoulders. At 36, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd fought his own battles against a tech world that questioned his credentials at every turn. His desk was organized chaos: energy drink cans, coding notebooks, and a small Mexican flag his daughter had given him. "You look like someone just declared war on your entire existence," he said, swiveling his chair to face her fully. "Close." Zara dropped into the chair across from him, the invitation still clutched in her hand. "Marcus is getting married." James's expression shifted from concern to something darker. He'd been there during the divorce, watching his brilliant business partner rebuild herself from the ashes of a marriage that had nearly destroyed her spirit. "And he invited you because?" "Because he's an arrogant bastard who thinks he can humiliate me one last time." Zara smoothed the invitation against her thigh. "Show everyone that he's back where he belongs, with someone who fits their world." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. 3 years ago, Zara had been a rising executive with a promising startup. Now, she was worth more than Marcus's entire family combined. Nexus Technologies had revolutionized hiring practices with AI that eliminated unconscious bias, ensuring that talent was recognized regardless of the name on the resume or the face in the interview. "You know what's beautiful about this?" James leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. "He has no idea what you've become." Their company employed 200 people across 4 floors, each hire carefully chosen not just for skill but for the diverse perspectives they brought. Zara had built the inclusive environment she'd never found in Marcus's world, a place where brilliance was celebrated regardless of its packaging. Her phone buzzed. David's name flashed on the screen, and she answered on the second ring. "Zara?" Her younger brother's voice carried the weight of concern across the line from his civil rights law office in D.C. "I heard about the invitation. Are you okay?" David Williams had inherited their mother's fierce protective instincts and their father's unwavering sense of justice. At 31, he'd already made a name for himself fighting discrimination cases, channeling the same drive that had lifted their family from their working-class roots in Detroit. "How did you never mind?" The legal community gossips worse than high school. Zara found herself smiling despite everything. "I'm fine, David." "Really?" "Bullshit. You're planning something. I can hear it in your voice." "Maybe I am." She looked out at the city sprawling below, at the empire she'd built from nothing but determination and code. "Maybe it's time Marcus learned what happens when you underestimate a Williams." James was watching her with growing interest, recognizing the shift in her demeanor. This wasn't the wounded ex-wife anymore. This was the CEO who'd stared down venture capitalists and emerged victorious. "Just be careful, sis. Don't let him drag you down to his level." "I won't. I'm going to rise so far above it that he'll need oxygen to see me." After hanging up, Zara stood and walked to the window. Below, Central Park stretched toward the horizon, its paths winding through carefully tended landscapes. She jogged those paths during the darkest days of her divorce, when every step felt like an act of defiance against those who tried to break her. "Staff meeting," she said suddenly, turning back to James. "Now." "Zara, trust me." 20 minutes later, the main conference room buzzed with energy as Nexus Technologies' diverse workforce gathered. Engineers from Nigeria and India sat beside designers from Brazil and programmers from Detroit. This was her real family, the one she'd chosen, the one that had chosen her back. Zara stood at the head of the table, looking out at faces that reflected the world she'd always believed in. 3 years ago, we started this company with a simple premise: that talent has no color, no gender, no accent. That brilliance comes in every package imaginable. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. These people had lived that truth, had fought their own battles against systems designed to exclude them. Today, I received a reminder of why that mission matters. Why what we've built here isn't just a company. It's a revolution. She held up the invitation, its gold lettering catching the conference room lights. I'm going to a wedding, and I'm going to show them exactly what they threw away. The room erupted in understanding, in solidarity, in the fierce joy of watching someone they respected prepare to claim her rightful place in a world that had tried to diminish her. James grinned from his seat near the window. This is going to be epic. Zara smiled back, feeling the weight of her decision settle around her like armor. Yes, it is. The call to her mother came at sunset, when the Manhattan skyline transformed into a canvas of gold and crimson. Zara stood at her penthouse window, phone pressed to her ear, watching the city pulse with evening energy 30 floors below. Gloria Williams answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. "Baby girl," I heard. Her mother's voice carried the weight of 5 decades of fighting battles both seen and unseen. Mrs. Henderson from church said her nephew works at that law firm downtown, heard about some wedding invitation. Zara closed her eyes. In Detroit's tight-knit community, news traveled faster than gossip, and both moved at the speed of light. "Mama, don't you mama me. What are you thinking? Putting yourself back in that snake pit." The words hit like a physical blow, not because they were harsh, but because they carried the protective fury of a woman who'd watched her daughter's spirit nearly break 3 years ago. Gloria Williams had cleaned houses and taught elementary school to put Zara through MIT, had worked double shifts so her brilliant daughter could chase dreams that seemed impossible from their small Detroit neighborhood. "I'm thinking it's time I stopped running from people who tried to make me feel small." Silence stretched across the line, heavy with unspoken history. Zara could picture her mother in the small kitchen where she'd raised 2 children on determination and prayer, her weathered hands probably gripping the phone like a lifeline. "You remember when you were 8? Gloria's voice softened, taking on the cadence of shared memory. "That department store downtown where I worked weekends?" The flashback hit like a wave. 8-year-old Zara, waiting by the customer service counter while her mother finished her shift. She'd watched a white customer berate Gloria over a return policy, watched her mother's shoulders straighten as the woman's voice grew louder, more demanding. "I want to speak to someone who actually understands English," the woman had snapped. Gloria's response had been measured, professional, devastating in its dignity. "Ma'am, I have a master's degree in education and 20 years of retail experience. I understand English perfectly. What I don't understand is why you think raising your voice will change store policy." Later, in the car, young Zara had asked why her mother didn't fight back harder. "Baby, there's a difference between rising above and bowing down. I rose above her ignorance, but I never, ever bowed down." "I remember," Zara whispered now, the lesson as clear as it had been 26 years ago. "Then you know this isn't about that boy or his fancy family. This is about you proving something to yourself." "Maybe it is." Zara turned from the window, her reflection ghost-like in the darkening glass. "Maybe I need to prove that I belong in any room I choose to enter. Not because they accept me, but because I accept myself." Gloria's sigh carried across the miles between them. "You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then you do it right. You walk in there like the queen you are, and you remind them what they lost when they chose ignorance over excellence." After hanging up, Zara felt the familiar fire that had driven her from that Detroit neighborhood to the pinnacle of Manhattan's tech world. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. About showing every little girl who looked like her that they belonged wherever their brilliance could take them. She picked up her phone again, scrolling to a contact she rarely used. The number connected on the second ring. "Elite Aviation Services. This is Marcus. I need to charter a helicopter for this Saturday. Manhattan to the Hamptons." "Certainly." May I ask the occasion? Zara smiled, feeling the pieces of her plan click into place like code compiling perfectly. I'm going to a wedding, and I want to make an entrance they'll never forget. The city sparkled below as she finalized arrangements that would transform Marcus's calculated humiliation into her moment of absolute triumph. By Saturday, everyone would understand exactly what they were dealing with. The game had changed, and Zara Williams was about to rewrite all the rules. The call came at 11 p.m. on Wednesday, 3 days after Zara's helicopter reservation had somehow leaked into Manhattan's gossip networks. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice that emerged from her phone was achingly familiar, soft, cultured, carrying the weight of expensive education and careful breeding. Zara? It's Rebecca. Rebecca Sterling. Zara nearly dropped her wine glass. She was curled on her penthouse couch, reviewing quarterly projections, when the woman who was about to become Marcus's wife reached across the chasm of their shared history. Rebecca. The name felt strange on her tongue. This is unexpected. I know you probably hate me. Rebecca's voice cracked slightly, revealing something raw beneath the polished surface. But I needed to call. I needed you to know that I know. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Outside Zara's windows, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds, indifferent to the human drama unfolding in its towers. Know what? About the others. Before me. Before you. Rebecca's breath hitched. Marcus has a pattern, Zara. He dates women who challenge him, who make him feel worldly and progressive. Then he brings them home, lets his family tear them apart, and runs back to safety. The words hit like physical blows. Zara had thought she was special, that their love had been real before it soured. But Rebecca was describing a calculated cycle, a game Marcus played with women's hearts and dignity. Why are you telling me this? Because you're coming to the wedding and I know why. And maybe you're the only one brave enough to break the cycle. Before Zara could respond, Rebecca had hung up, leaving her staring at her phone in the blue glow of her living room. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage crumbling into new, uglier shapes. The next morning brought Trevor Ashford to her office, Marcus's best man since their Harvard days. He stood in her reception area like a man approaching his own execution, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. I need 5 minutes, he said when Priya tried to intercept him. Please. Zara emerged from her office, studying the man who'd been Marcus's closest friend and her own quiet ally during the worst moments of her marriage. Trevor had never joined in the subtle cruelties, had always treated her with genuine respect, but he'd also never spoken up when it mattered most. Trevor, this is a surprise. He's losing his mind, Zara. Trevor's blue eyes were bloodshot, desperate. Ever since word got out that you're coming, he's been obsessed, calling old friends, trying to control the narrative, making sure everyone knows you're just a bitter ex-wife trying to cause trouble. They moved into her office, where Trevor collapsed into a chair like a man carrying the weight of accumulated guilt. I should have said something. During the marriage, during the divorce. I should have told him his family was wrong, that you were the best thing that ever happened to him. But you didn't. No, I didn't. He met her gaze directly. I was a coward. And now he's about to marry Rebecca, and I can see him already starting the same pattern with her. The subtle undermining, the casual cruelties disguised as jokes. Zara felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition that this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman Marcus would use and discard, every person his family would deem inappropriate for their carefully curated world. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Williams, this is Elena Vasquez from Financial Tribune. I covered your IPO last month. Could we talk? I think there's a bigger story here. Elena Vasquez. Zara knew the name. A fierce Latina journalist who'd built her reputation exposing corporate corruption and social inequality. Her coverage of Nexus Technologies had been brilliant, focusing not just on the financial success but on the company's mission to democratize opportunity. I have to take this, Zara told Trevor, who nodded and stood to leave. Zara? He paused at the door. Whatever you're planning for Saturday, I hope it works. Marcus needs to face what he's become. As Trevor left, Zara dialed Elena's number, sensing that the pieces of something larger were falling into place. Ms. Vasquez? You wanted to talk. I did. I've been hearing whispers about a wedding this weekend, about a tech CEO making a statement. I think there's a story here about power, about who gets to belong in elite spaces, about what happens when brilliance refuses to be diminished. Elena's voice carried the sharp intelligence of someone who recognized the broader implications of personal drama. Are you interested in covering it? Ms. Williams, I've been waiting my whole career for a story like this. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn in Manhattan, the kind of day that made the city feel electric with possibility. Zara's penthouse had been transformed into a war room of preparation, every surface covered with fabric swatches, jewelry cases, and the tools of transformation that would armor her for tomorrow's battle. Keisha Thompson swept through the space like a force of nature, her arms laden with garment bags and her eyes blazing with the fierce joy of someone who understood the assignment completely. At 38, Keisha had styled everyone from Beyoncé to Supreme Court justices, but this felt different, personal, revolutionary, necessary. Baby girl, when I'm done with you tomorrow, they're going to need oxygen masks just to look at you, Keisha declared, hanging a midnight blue gown that seemed to capture starlight in its folds. The dress was a masterpiece by Dapper Dan, custom-made in 72 hours of fevered creativity. It spoke of African royalty and American ambition, of a woman who refused to be diminished by others' limitations. The fabric moved like liquid confidence, designed to make a statement that would echo long after the last dance. It's perfect, Zara breathed, running her fingers along the intricate beadwork that caught the morning light. Perfect isn't the goal, honey. Unforgettable is. They worked through the morning with the precision of a military operation. Hair, makeup, accessories, every detail calculated to project power without apology. But it was when Keisha opened the final jewelry box that Zara's breath caught. Her grandmother's pearls lay nestled in faded velvet, each one a testament to survival and dignity in the face of systematic oppression. Mama Rose had worn them to church every Sunday, had clutched them during the worst moments of Jim Crow, had passed them down with the whispered instruction to never let them make you small. She would be so proud, Keisha said softly, understanding the weight of the moment. I hope so. The drive to Woodlawn Cemetery took 40 minutes through Queens traffic, but Zara needed this pilgrimage before tomorrow's confrontation. She knelt beside her grandmother's headstone, the autumn wind carrying the scent of dying leaves and distant possibilities. Hey, Mama Rose, I know it's been too long. Her voice carried across the quiet cemetery, where generations of dreams and struggles lay at rest. I'm about to do something that might seem crazy, but I think you'd understand. The marble headstone bore simple words. Rose Williams, 1925 to 2010. She rose above. But Zara knew the fuller story. The woman who'd cleaned white families' houses while raising 5 children, who'd faced down segregation with quiet dignity, who'd lived to see her granddaughter graduate from MIT. Tomorrow I'm going back to that world that tried to break me. But I'm not going as the woman who left. I'm going as the woman you raised me to be. Someone who takes up space without apology, who belongs wherever her brilliance can take her. The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead, and for a moment, Zara could almost hear her grandmother's voice. Baby girl, you show them what we're made of. Meanwhile, across town in the Whitmore family's Upper East Side mansion, Marcus paced his childhood bedroom like a caged animal. The space hadn't changed since his Harvard days. Polo trophies, family photos, the accumulated detritus of inherited privilege. But today it felt like a prison. She's going to ruin everything, he muttered into his phone, his conversation with Trevor growing more frantic by the minute. Marcus, maybe you should consider that you brought this on yourself. Trevor's voice carried a weariness that spoke of years of enabling bad behavior. Brought what on myself? I invited my ex-wife to my wedding. It was supposed to be a gesture of maturity. Bullshit. You wanted to humiliate her. And now you're terrified because she's successful enough to turn the tables. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Marcus had expected the broken woman who'd left 3 years ago, not the tech mogul who'd built an empire from the ashes of their marriage. Downstairs, Richard Whitmore stood in his study, staring out at Central Park while his son's panic echoed through the house. At 72, he'd built his real estate empire on the careful cultivation of the right connections, the right marriages, the right social positioning. Zara's presence tomorrow threatened to remind everyone of their family's capacity for cruelty. "She's worth more than all of us combined now," he said to his wife, Eleanor, who sat rigid in her antique chair. "Money doesn't buy class, Richard. It never has." But even Eleanor's voice lacked its usual conviction. They'd underestimated Zara Williams once, dismissed her as a temporary aberration in their son's life. Now she was returning as something they'd never expected, a force they couldn't control or diminish. Back in her penthouse, Zara stood before her bathroom mirror as Keisha applied the final touches to her preparation ritual. Tomorrow's dress hung like a promise in her bedroom. The pearls waited in their velvet case, and her helicopter was fueled and ready. "You know what the best part of tomorrow will be?" Keisha asked, stepping back to admire her work. "What's that?" "Watching them realize that they didn't break you. They forged you into something stronger." Zara smiled, seeing not just her reflection but the reflection of every woman who'd been told she didn't belong, every dreamer who'd been dismissed, every brilliant mind that had been underestimated because of the color of their skin or the circumstances of their birth. Tomorrow, she would show them all what happened when you tried to dim a star. The war was about to begin. The Whitmore estate sprawled across 12 manicured acres of Hampton's perfection, its Georgian columns rising like monuments to old money and older prejudices. White roses cascaded from every surface, their pristine petals catching the October sunlight as 300 guests gathered on the emerald lawn overlooking the Atlantic. Marcus stood at the altar in his custom Seville Row tuxedo, his jaw clenched so tightly it threatened to crack his practiced smile. Beside him, Rebecca looked ethereal in her grandmother's vintage Chanel, but her eyes kept darting toward the sky as if expecting divine intervention, or something far more earthly and dramatic. The ceremony proceeded with clockwork precision. Vows were exchanged with the mechanical perfection of a business transaction. Rings slipped onto fingers that trembled slightly, and the assembled crowd of Manhattan's elite applauded with the enthusiasm of people performing their social obligations. But underneath the polished surface, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. "Do you, Marcus Jonathan Whitmore III, take Rebecca Catherine Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." The words came out strangled, his eyes scanning the crowd for a face that hadn't yet appeared. As the newlyweds kissed and the crowd erupted in obligatory celebration, whispers rippled through the assembled guests like wind through wheat. The name Zara Williams passed from mouth to mouth, carried on currents of curiosity, anticipation, and barely concealed excitement. "I heard she's worth $200 million now," murmured Patricia Vanderbilt to her companion. "More than the Whitmores, certainly," came the reply, sharp with the particular cruelty of high society. The cocktail hour began with champagne flowing like water and conversations that danced around the elephant in the room. Marcus worked the crowd with desperate energy, his laugh too loud, his smile too bright, his eyes constantly checking his watch and scanning the horizon. Then, at precisely 4:30, the sound cut through the afternoon air like a blade through silk. Thwop, thwop, thwop. Helicopter blades growing louder by the second. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. 300 heads turned skyward as a sleek black helicopter appeared over the treeline, its rotors catching the sunlight like a mechanical angel of reckoning. Marcus's face drained of color so completely, he looked like a ghost in an expensive tuxedo. "She wouldn't," he whispered, but his voice carried no conviction. The helicopter touched down on the estate's private helipad with the precision of a military operation. For a moment, nothing happened. The rotors slowed, the engine wound down, and the entire wedding held its collective breath. Then the door opened. Zara Williams emerged like a vision from another realm entirely. The midnight blue gown flowed around her like liquid starlight, every bead and sequin catching the light as she moved with the fluid grace of someone who owned not just the moment, but the very air around her. Her grandmother's pearls gleamed at her throat, and her head was held high with the regal bearing of a woman who had conquered worlds. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by a silence so complete that the distant crash of waves seemed thunderous. This wasn't the broken woman who had left their world 3 years ago. This was something else entirely, power personified, success made manifest, a force of nature wrapped in couture. Jesus Christ, someone whispered, and the spell broke. Suddenly everyone was moving, talking, positioning themselves for introductions. The same people who had whispered about her appropriateness 3 years ago now surged forward like moths to a flame, drawn by the irresistible magnetism of genuine achievement. "Zara, my God, you look absolutely stunning," gushed Caroline Astor, the same woman who had once suggested that Zara might be more comfortable at the children's table during a charity dinner. "Thank you, Caroline. You look exactly the same." Zara's smile was polite, devastating, and completely controlled. Within minutes, she was surrounded by a growing circle of admirers, business cards appearing like magic, conversations about investments and partnerships flowing as freely as the champagne. The irony was delicious and complete. Marcus's attempt to humiliate her had transformed her into the most sought-after person at his own wedding. "Ms. Williams, I'm Jonathan Pierce from Goldman Sachs. We've been following Nexus Technologies with great interest. Zara, darling, you simply must tell me about your diversity initiatives. We're looking to modernize our hiring practices. I represent several tech startups that could benefit from your expertise." Across the lawn, Marcus watched his carefully orchestrated social triumph crumble into ash. His new wife stood beside him, her hand on his arm, but her eyes were fixed on Zara with something that looked suspiciously like admiration. "She's magnificent," Rebecca whispered, and Marcus realized with growing horror that his plan hadn't just backfired. It had exploded in his face with nuclear force. Elena Vasquez moved through the crowd like a shark through water, her camera capturing every moment, every expression, every delicious second of Marcus's humiliation. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a revolution. The confrontation had been building all evening like a storm gathering force over the Atlantic. Marcus had watched from across the reception tent as Zara effortlessly commanded attention, her laughter mixing with the clink of champagne glasses and the rustle of expensive fabric. Each business card pressed into her hand, each admiring glance, each moment of genuine respect she received felt like a personal assault on his carefully constructed narrative. By 9 o'clock, the open bar had done its work. Marcus's face was flushed, his bow tie askew, his usual composure eroded by alcohol and the bitter taste of his own miscalculation. He'd spent 3 years telling himself that Zara's success was a fluke, that she'd never truly belong in his world. Now she stood in the center of that world, not as an interloper but as its most celebrated guest. The tent glowed with warm amber light from crystal chandeliers, casting dancing shadows across the faces of Manhattan's elite. A string quartet played softly in one corner while guests moved in elegant clusters, their conversations a symphony of privilege and power. But all of that faded into background noise as Marcus approached Zara near the dessert table. His steps unsteady but his intent crystal clear. "Enjoying yourself?" His voice carried the particular venom of a man whose pride had been publicly eviscerated. Zara turned slowly, her expression serene as a lake before dawn. She'd been expecting this moment, had prepared for it with the same strategic precision she brought to board meetings and product launches. Around them, conversations continued, but she could feel the subtle shift in attention, the way nearby guests angled their bodies to catch whatever drama was about to unfold. "Very much, thank you. It's a beautiful wedding, Marcus. Rebecca looks radiant." "Cut the bullshit, Zara. You came here to upstage me, to make some kind of statement." Elena Vasquez materialized at the edge of their conversation like a ghost with a camera, her journalist's instincts recognizing the moment when private pain became public spectacle. Several other guests, including Trevor and, surprisingly, Eleanor Whitmore, had also drifted closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of confrontation. "Actually, I came here because you invited me. Zara's voice remained level, controlled, devastating in its calm. And I have to thank you for that, Marcus. For the invitation, and for everything that came before it. Thank me. His laugh was bitter, ugly. For what? For showing me exactly who you were, who your family was, who I was when I tried to make myself smaller to fit into your world. She paused, letting the words settle like sediment in still water. Because that humiliation, that rejection, that moment when your father offered me money to disappear, it all motivated me to become exactly who I was meant to be. Marcus's face darkened, the alcohol stripping away his last vestiges of social polish. You always were too ambitious for your own good, too uppity. Maybe if you'd learned your place. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Your place. The phrase carried centuries of weight, generations of systematic oppression distilled into two simple words that revealed everything ugly about the man who'd once claimed to love her. The nearby conversations died completely. Eleanor Whitmore's champagne glass trembled in her hand. Trevor stepped forward as if to intervene, but Zara raised one elegant hand, stopping him with a gesture that spoke of absolute control. My place, she repeated softly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent space around them. You're right, Marcus. I do know my place. It's at the head of a boardroom table, making decisions that affect hundreds of lives. It's on magazine covers as one of the most successful entrepreneurs of my generation. It's in rooms where brilliance is celebrated regardless of the package it comes in. She stepped closer, and despite being several inches shorter, she seemed to tower over him. My place is wherever my intelligence, my work ethic, and my vision can take me. And the beautiful thing about that, it has absolutely nothing to do with your approval or your family's narrow definition of who belongs where. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Elena's camera captured every moment, every expression, every second of Marcus's public unraveling. Around them, guests who had once whispered about Zara's appropriateness now stared at Marcus with undisguised disgust. You want to know what I learned from our marriage? Zara continued, her voice never rising above conversational level, but somehow commanding the attention of everyone within 50 feet. That excellence is the best revenge. That dignity in the face of ignorance is more powerful than any insult. That when people try to make you small, the most revolutionary thing you can do is take up exactly as much space as you deserve. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. Congratulations on your wedding, Marcus. I hope you and Rebecca find the happiness you're looking for. As she walked away, her midnight blue gown flowing behind her like liquid starlight, the crowd parted before her like the Red Sea. Behind her, Marcus stood frozen in the wreckage of his own making, while his new wife stared after Zara with something that looked remarkably like awe. Eleanor Whitmore was the first to break the silence, her voice carrying the sharp edge of a woman who just watched her son reveal his true character to 300 witnesses. Marcus Jonathan Whitmore, you are a disgrace. The helicopter's rotors cut through the Hamptons night as Zara walked across the estate's pristine lawn, her midnight blue gown flowing like liquid starlight. Behind her, the wedding reception continued in hushed, scandalized tones, but she felt only the lightness of someone who had finally closed a chapter that had haunted her for too long. Zara, wait! Trevor's voice carried across the manicured grass. She turned to see Marcus's former best man jogging toward her, his bow tie undone, his usually perfect composure shattered by what he'd witnessed. I need to say this before you leave. He stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. I'm sorry for every dinner where I stayed silent, every cruel joke I didn't challenge. You deserved better from all of us. The sincerity in his voice surprised her. This wasn't the passive enabler who'd watched her marriage crumble. This was a man genuinely reckoning with his own complicity. Thank you, Trevor. That means more than you know. Could we stay in touch? Professionally, I mean, and maybe personally too. His vulnerability was startling, real. I'd like the chance to be the friend I should have been. Zara smiled, feeling something shift between them. I'd like that. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying her away from the wreckage of Marcus's carefully orchestrated humiliation. Manhattan's lights spread below like scattered diamonds. She had won more than a battle tonight. She had reclaimed her narrative entirely. By Monday morning, Elena's article had exploded across every platform, transforming a society wedding into a cultural moment about dignity, success, and the power of rising above hatred. Marcus woke to find his world crumbling, business associates distancing themselves from the toxic Whitmore name. But Zara barely noticed the media storm. She sat in her corner office, focused on architectural plans for the Rose Williams Foundation, $50 million dedicated to lifting young women of color into STEM fields. The best revenge wasn't just success. It was using that success to ensure others never faced the barriers she had overcome.